This lesson is section 1.7. It's on constructions. In order to do this lesson, you're going to need a compass and a straight edge. That leads us into our first definition of what a construction is. It's creating precise and accurate geometric figures using only a compass and a straight edge. Some of the things that we're going to learn how to make today are perpendicular lines. So that's two lines that intersect to form a right angle. A perpendicular bisector, which is if you're given a segment, you draw a line or a ray or a segment that is perpendicular. In other words, it makes the right angle with the other segment, but it also bisects the segment. It cuts it into two equal parts. So the point where it goes through would be the midpoint. So the distance from A to M would be the same as the distance from M to B. Those two segments would be congruent. So a perpendicular bisector not only makes right angles, but it also bisects a segment and cuts it into two equal parts. The other one that we're going to learn today is an angle bisector. Okay, bisect means to cut in half. Again, so just like the segment bisector, the angle bisector cuts the angle into two equal parts. So we are going to learn how to draw a ray or how to create a ray that takes this angle ACB and cuts it into two equal parts. So the angle here has exactly the same measure as the angle on the other side. Okay. So in order to get started, there are a couple of basic constructions that you need to know in order to be able to create these things. The first thing that we're going to learn how to do is copy a segment. So if you have a segment, for example, in your book, and you need to copy that exact same length onto your paper, or if you don't, we don't have any rulers. If you notice on your straight edges, they have no markings on them. It's strictly that, a straight edge. So we are going to learn how to create a segment and make it exactly the right length without actually measuring it with a ruler. What this will allow us to do is it'll allow us to look at the characteristics of these things, of perpendicular lines, angle bisectors, perpendicular bisectors, segments, angles in general. It will be able to allow us to look at the characteristics and what they do for us without worrying about being exact using protractors and rulers. Okay, so to copy a given segment, the steps are right here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to copy this segment right here down somewhere else on your paper. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is draw a line. So take your straight edge somewhere else on your paper and just draw a nice long line. You're not sure exactly where the end's going to be, so make it long enough. Make it longer than the one that you've got. Then we're going to learn how to use our compass to measure lengths. So you're going to take your compass and you're going to put the pointy end right on the end of the segment. And then you're going to put the other end on the other end point. Okay, so use your compass, and what you're going to basically do is stretch it out and put it on the end points. Then, without squeezing it, okay, without squeezing the compass, you're going to pick it up and carry it down to the new line that you've drawn. The end point here will match with the end point here. Okay, these are the same. Oops. And then you use the compass and you make what's called a construction mark. Okay, compasses make arches. Well, or unless you go all the way around and they make a circle, but they make arcs. That's what they do. That mark I call an X because it makes an X with the line that was already drawn. That X marks the spot, which means the segment from here to here will be exactly the same length as the segment from here to here. And that's how you copy a segment. For constructions, you always leave the mark on the line. Do not erase the construction mark. That's how you know that you did it exactly accurate, is by leaving the construction mark there. Okay, so that's how you copy a segment. The next one we're going to do is copying an angle. So if you have an angle measure and you don't necessarily know what the degrees are, but you need that angle measure somewhere else on your paper, these are the steps you're going to follow. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is wherever you need that angle to be, you're going to draw yourself a line. Then you're going to grab your compass. And you are going to put the end of it, I'm going to pull it down here. Put the end of it right on the vertex of the angle. And what you are going to do is make something called reference points. Okay? Now yours is a little bit easier to manipulate. Mine, I have to go through the steps here. But what you're going to do is you're going to make 2 reference points. Okay? This is one reference point. This is the other reference point. What that's going to do is give you a distance to measure. Okay? If I measured the width of the angle here, it would be a very different width than if I measured the angle out here. So by creating this reference line, you know that you're going to measure the width of the angle at those 2 points. Those are your reference points. Okay? Now you need to create that same set of reference points down here. Okay, so your vertex of your angle is the end point of your segment. So bring your compass over, and then you're going to create that same arc. This arc is exactly the same as this arc. Okay. This reference point is going to be right here. That's this one. You can see that this segment is going to be exactly the same length as this segment. What you need to do now is find this other reference point. It's up here somewhere. The question is, how far away is it? So now you go back, and now you're going to measure your width between your reference points. Okay, so put your compass points there. Measure the width between them. Now, without squeezing, you're going to come down here and you have to do that same thing. Okay, so here this reference point is already created, so you're going to put the pointy end on that one. I'm going to swing my compass around, and wherever my compass crosses this point, that's your width. The width here has to be the same as the width here. So I'm going to bring it around a little bit more, and I'm going to again make an X. You can see that this reference point is going to match up exactly with this reference point. Now you simply take your straight edge, line it up, and draw your line through that reference point. This angle is now exactly the same measurement as this angle. Okay. Next thing we're going to learn how to do is bisect an angle. So that's if you're given an angle, how do you cut it into 2 equal angles? First thing you're going to do is make that exact same thing as copying an angle. You're going to make those 2 reference points right here. So you're going to take your compass, put your pointy end on the vertex, and then you're going to draw 2 reference points. And you can go as far out as you want. Usually the farther out you go, the little bit easier it is. If you get these 2 edges too close together, it's very hard to hang on to the compass. So the first thing you're going to do is make those 2 reference points. Then the key to bisecting an angle is every point of the angle bisector, if we go back to the other page, every point on this angle bisector is exactly the same distance from this ray as it is from this ray. So what we have to do after we've created our reference points is to find a point out here that's exactly the same distance from those two reference points. We know the vertex is, but in order to make a line, we have to have 2 points. So we have to find a second point out here that's the same distance from those two reference points. So now what you're going to do is, I just use the same distance. You can squeeze the compass now if you want to, but it's easiest just to use the same distance. Okay? So now on those two reference points, I'm going to bring it in a little bit. I'm going to make an arc here, and that means that every point on there is the same distance from this reference point. And now if I use that exact same distance and put it on the other reference point and do that exact same thing, every point on there is the same distance from this reference point. And where they cross, right here, this point is the same distance from this reference point as it is from this reference point, which means that it is on the angle bisector. So now we take our straight edge, and if we draw a line, our line will go right through that intersection where the X marks the spot there, and that line is our angle bisector. This angle would be exactly the same measure as this angle. All right, the last thing that we are going to learn how to do is a perpendicular bisector. Okay, and so that's the one that not only goes through at 90 degrees, but also cuts the segment into 2 equal parts. This one is probably the easiest of the constructions. It also gives you the prettiest outcome. So what you're going to do is, the very first thing you have to do, spread out your compass so that it's bigger than half of the segment. You can make it the same length as the segment or longer. You can make it as big as you want, but it has to be bigger than half, otherwise it won't work. So I make it at least 3/4 to the full length. Okay? And then all you're going to do is, if we go back and look at the characteristics of a perpendicular bisector, every point on the perpendicular bisector is going to be the same distance from this endpoint as it is from this endpoint. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for points that are the same distance from A as they are from B. And we need 2 to make a line. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating 2 points that are the same distance from this point as they are from this point. And then when we connect them, that will create our perpendicular bisector. So I grab my compass and I draw an arc here, and I'm going to draw it above and below. And the reason for that is that I am going to create a point above the line and a point below the line so that I can connect them. Then I'm going to go over to my other endpoint without squeezing. Notice I'm using the exact same distance, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to make an arc, and it's going to go above and below. And if I move my compass out of the way, you'll see that there's a point, an intersecting point above, an X above, and an X below. If I now take my straight edge and draw a line, the line that goes through those 2 constructions, here and here, this line will cut this segment in half. It will also create a 90-degree angle. So this segment is going to be the same length as this segment, and that line comes through at 90 degrees. So those are the constructions that you are going to be working on today. That ends this lesson, and your homework is as follows.